Bezras Hashem Yisporach, Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parashat Vaera, Shanas Tov Shirin Pei Beis. The Medrash on Shir HaShirim quotes Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says a parable, a moshel as follows. There was a man who inherited from his father a heap of junk, a heap of rubbish, says the Medrash, and I would like to quote. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Echad nafla lo Yerusha b'mkoim ashpo. He received an inheritance in a place of a junkyard. Voya yoresh otzir, but the person inherited was lazy man, so he sold it off for cheap. And then the person who bought it, the buyer, went and he rummaged through the junk, rummaged through the garbage until he found a treasure hidden amongst all this garbage and all the junk. And he went and he sold this treasure, became the richest man in town. He built himself a paltin gedoilo. He built himself a huge palace. He was going in the shuk, va'avodim were standing around him. He had the servants all around him. He was walking like the richest man in town. Now the seller had a look and saw all his great wealth that he received from the inheritance that he bought him, that he sold him, the inheritance that he sold him. So he said, Vai mashe badati. Oy vey, look how much I regret what I sold, what I lost by selling him what I really thought was rubbish, what I thought was junk, and he became so wealthy from it. Kach, this Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says in Shir HaShirim Parashat Dalet, Kach, same too, the Jews in Egypt were despised in the eyes of the Egyptians. They were the slaves. They were the low-class people of the country. Don't forget, they were slaves for 210 years. That's like America. America's like 250 years. So for 210 years, almost the whole time of America, these people have been a nation of slaves. Says Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, they were mo'usim b'mitzrayim meshubodim b'titul aveinim. They were only working with cement all day, and that's all they knew to do. And the Mitzrayim said about these people, they have no worth, they have no intellect, they're not a people of a special nation. But then, when the Egyptians saw afterwards the Jews in the Midbar, in the desert, each encampment had a flag. They had the Mishkan with Ashros Hashchina. Then they saw, Vailonu Mashi Badednu. How did we let this precious nation out of our country? They realized how great the Jews were. And this was a mashal of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Yossi comes, the first one is Rabbi Yonason. Rabbi Yonason, a very great Talmudical sage, comes and says to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, I have a different parable to describe this idea of a man who had a field. And it was a dry field far from any irrigation. There were no wells, no rivers close by. So he sold it for cheap. And the buyer went and he started to dig a bit around in the field, and the Mayan, a spring of water, came to irrigate the field. It was the most amazing. Now this field became a lush field. It was the most expensive field around. And this man became very rich. So when the seller saw that, he regretted and said, Vaili mashe ovadati. Said Rabbi Yonason, this is as well an example. Am Yisrael were Mitzrayim, were despised by the Egyptian. They thought they were low-class people, a nation of slaves. But later when they came out, they saw their kingship. They saw the people that have the flag of Malchus of Yehuda, the Kohanim, the Mishkan. Then they regretted and they said, why we didn't know what a precious nation we had amongst us. The third mashal is of Rabbi Yossi. These are all Tanoim from the Gemara. Rabbi Yossi gives us third parable, and it is of a man who had lots of logs of wood. He had nothing what to do with it. He sold it on. The buyer used these logs as made from it, like you would say in IKEA. He made from it a shop of furniture, of tables and chairs, and different furniture. Became a very rich, a wealthy man. So the seller regretted, said, why I sold him this wood, and I didn't know how much you can make, how much wealth lay in this wood. And the same too, the Egyptians didn't appreciate the nation, the Israel that they had in Egypt. Only later when they went to the Midbar, they saw the great nation Israel was. And I ask you, Rabbi Isai, these are Tanoim of the Gemara, one of the greatest Talmudic sages. Just to be quoted by the Gemara, you have to have reached a level where you can be Machaya Mesa, where you can resuscitate the dead. That's the level of holiness these Rabbonim had. And we need, each one has to tell us another parable. I got this parable. It's not like the logs of wood. It's like the Ma'ayan, the spring from the field. Or it's the person who inherited the junk from his father and then only to find that the buyer became very wealthy from it. Why do we need 3 different parables? Wasn't enough with one where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said right in the beginning? And no, Rabbi Yonasan added one, and Rabbi Yossi added another one. Why do we need these 3 Mesholim? There must be something, a lesson to be learned from each moshel that each rabbi is trying to explain and teach to us. There must be some depth that we can understand to our own lives, that we can learn from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, from Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yossi. So there's this beautiful explanation I once heard from my Rosh Yeshiva, Zechat Tzadik V'Rocha, Reb Chaim Kaufman from Gateshead. But before I introduce the explanation, I would like to say an anecdote. The camel once asked his father and said, Dad, why are our feet not like the other animals, not like the horse? Our feet, when we press it on the ground, it spreads out. Why? The horse's feet doesn't spread out like ours. So he says, my dear son, we are camels. We can go in the deserts, in the furthest deserts for miles and miles, out where population, where the people live. And there are no roads or no pavements. And there's only sand. Now we may sink in the sand. So we have these special feet that when we press down, it spreads the weight so we don't sink in the sand. Said by Dad, our eyelids, we don't only have one eyelid, we have 3 eyelids. Why do we need 3 eyelids? Said, my dear son, we travel in the deserts, in all conditions. There are sandstorms that may blow in the desert. And we have to keep on going even in the sandstorms. So we have 1 eyelid we can close, we can still see a bit, a 2nd eyelid, a 3rd eyelid. This protects our eyes as we travel in the desert, into the distant lands. And this is why we have these special eyelids. Then he went on to ask, my father, why have we got these humps on our back? He said this is a very special to give us to retain the liquid, the moisture that we need when we travel in the heat of the desert. Sun can reach 100 degrees. It's extremely hot in the deserts. And where do we get our moisture? Where do we get it from? From these humps. It stores so much water, and slowly we can use this water to help us survive the heat of the desert. So said the camel to his father, one more question I have, father. If we have the special feet that we don't sink in the sands, and we have the special eyelid that we can travel thousands of kilometers and not be and not be stopped by the sandstorms. We even have these special humps that keeps us in moisture throughout the heats of the deserts. So what are we doing locked in a cage in the safari? This is the idea. The idea, Am Yisrael, they were in a cage of Mitzrayim, which is called Meitzarim. They were closed in. And Paroi, the Egyptian, is like the Yetzer Hara that tells the Jews, what are you worth? What are you capable of? What can you go out of this? Where will you reach? Where can you go? You have to stay here in the cage. And each one of the Tanoim is teaching Am Yisrael. They're teaching us for all generations. That we have, each one is quoting us another moshel, which symbolizes another special brocha, another quality that we have as Bnei Yisrael. And this is what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said this man inherited, every Yid inherits deep within him a schus of us, the holiness of his father, the great father, from Avram, Yitzchok and Yaakov. All these great dargas are in us. We're not just another person on the street. We are Bnei Avram, Yitzchok and Yaakov. We have this matmon which we inherited from our fathers. Rabbi Yossi says, not only have we got a schus of us, but it is like the dry field. It doesn't look like got any irrigation, but only when he dug a bit he saw that there's a ma'ayon, a spring in this field. And this ma'ayon is a ma'ayon of Kedusha, that's a neshama that every Yid has. Every Jew has a soul that comes from Kisei HaKavod. Every Jew has a soul so holy and so pure that comes from the highest levels of Kedusha and Shemayim, all the way down every morning. And every morning we appreciate what we receive. You know why? We say, Moida ani lefonecho, Melech Chai, we thank Hashem very much. We are grateful to Hashem for the neshama He returned to us. And then we say, Rabbo emunosecho. Rabbo emunosecho means, what great faith you show us. You have faith in us by returning to us a neshama. In the morning we wake up with this, we say, Hashem, you believe in me. You gave me a neshama, which to Hashem is so precious. And the neshama is so pure and so holy. He said, but I trust you, I'm giving you the neshama. This is what we say every morning. First we thank Hashem. You return to me my soul with great mercy. How great is your faith that you have in me, that you gave me something so precious and neshama, this spring of Kedusha that we have. And the third is a holy Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says that there maybe you have as well as schusovos, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, which you inherited in you, the schusovos. You as well may have a neshama from Shemayim, a spring of Kedusha. But you have as well like the logs of wood, which you can change them and make them into chairs and tables. You can make them into kelim. This is a brocha, and the kishroinos that Hashem gave to every person, that you can develop yourself into these great kishroinos of Am Yisrael, only to you, which Hashem gave to you personally, a brocha in your life, and you can use it to share with your family, to share with your friends, share with people in your shul, and share with Am Yisrael. It's a brocha I have gave you. When you tap onto this and you develop it, and you can make it into a great source of blessing. So we have here an understanding. When the Jews were in Egypt, the Mitzrayim, the Paro is telling the Jews, what are you worth? You're a nation of slaves. What have you got in you? But when we came out of Egypt, we saw the great koichos every Jew has. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says it's a schus of us. Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yonason says it's a neshama. And Rabbi Yossi says it is the woods, the kishroinas, the kelim that every person is blessed with. And same too throughout the Golus. Just to end with Reb Tzodek HaKohen says, it's brought down Rabbi Steinbuch, Reb Dov Steinbuch in the Sefer Imrei Devash brings out Reb Tzodek HaKohen, and he asks that in this week's Pasha, Moshe Rabbeinu came, V'lo Shomwel Moshe. They didn't listen to Moshe Mikoitze Ruach Mavoda Kosher from the slavery. They couldn't even listen to Moshe Rabbeinu. They gave up hope from redemption. They weren't listening to Moshe. But yet, earlier in Shemos, when Moshe came and said, Pokod Yifkod Elokim Eschem V'yamenu, they believed him. What's the difference? Why did then believe him and now not? Says Reb Tzodek HaKohen the most amazing thing. He says, don't forget, Moshe Rabbeinu, remember he was a prince in the palace of Paro. He had the admiration of Paro. And he gave an advice to Paro. He said, look, The people who work every day, 7 days a week, the results are not that good. If you give them 1 day break, then they will be really strong and good avodim. So he says, okay, I agree. What day should we give them? And Moshe gave Shabbos. Yitzmach Moshe b'matnas chelkoi, because he introduced Shabbos even before Hashem commanded the idea of Shabbos. But then afterwards, when Moshe came back many years later, wanted to redeem Am Yisrael, so what did Paro say? No, we have to intensify the work. So how did he intensify the work? They're not anymore going to rest on Shabbos. There's no more Shabbos. When there's no Shabbos, then they forgot who they were. A Jew on Shabbos is a day we remember who we are. It may be during the week we are in the Golos. During the week we're connected to so many things. We're busy in business and we're traveling here. We may look at ourselves like someone else, just another person on the street. But when we come Shabbos, the big day Shabbos, a Yid sings his miras on Shabbos by the Shabbos table. He remembers who he is. He feels the neshama. He feels the holiness. He has the schus avos of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and he remembers his kishroinus, how special he is, and he can share his blessing with his family. He can share it with his friends, share it with his people. And this is the idea. We should never forget who we are in the Golos, and it's especially through Shabbos, we can help us to remember Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. We came out of Mitzrayim. We say it on Kiddush, because Shabbos is like a Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's coming. We leave the Golos and we enter a spiritual realm, a spiritual place. So, Bezras Hashem, we will be Zoicha to come out and be Zoicha to have a wonderful Shabbos. Thank you very much.